Momentarily for class solidarity, cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed, deep state, fake fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights, highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. The The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. Nomiki Show. Clash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, fake fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show.
Hello and welcome to the Nomiki Show. It is Wednesday, December 15th. Oh my God, I can't believe 2021 is almost over. I feel like this is good and bad. I don't know. I mean, last year was just a missing year. Like sometimes I talk to people like, oh, I haven't seen you in like 6 months, no, 3 years, because time doesn't exist anymore. I'm sure you all feel the same way. I am here In Florida, I had to come down here for a couple of days, and there is something to be said about this little liberal bubble that we live in, or I live in at least, in Astoria, New York, which is arguably one of the most progressive places in the country. And when you sometimes get out of, and granted, there is a lot of conservatism in Astoria too. There's very little in between. But when I come to Florida, there's a certain flavor of conservatism that always alarms me. Last time I flew to Florida, there was a guy on my flight that said, with a shirt on that said Proud Boys and a MAGA hat. This time when I flew down, there was a guy who had a Steven Crowder, Louder with Crowder sweatshirt on, and a Red USA hat. It's a subtler take on where they stand. But I made a joke online, and I said there's a certain type of person who decides to wear this when they go to the airport. Last time I got off of a flight to land in Florida, I had a layover. It's always Florida, but this is important because as Florida goes, famously, so goes the country and history, and here we are today. But last time I landed in Florida for a layover, this is maybe, I don't know, this is definitely in the Trump years. There was a guy, I know it was in the Biden, I think it was during the campaign. There was a guy with a shirt on that said, F Biden. And it was before they had the let's go, I don't want to be flagged, because that's obviously code now for many other things. Just sitting in the airport, I got off the flight. I'm like, well, that was a welcome that I've never seen before. I say this in jest, but it's actually very serious, because why I say this is these are the people who are the most vocal. We all know folks who quietly voted for Trump because they maybe secretly kind of like what he has to say, or some things he has to say. We know folks who voted for Trump because of the tax breaks. We know folks who say, I'm not Trumpian, but I am more I'm libertarian. Or I watch Joe Rogan, but I'm not a fan of Trump, but I like what Joe Rogan has to say. And look he's been progressive on all these other issues. Or, Elon Musk has got really fascinating takes. He's a brilliant man. Or the guy that I ran into a week ago that said, Jordan Peterson is one of the smartest people on the planet. And also, I hate Trump. So these are flavors of conservatism, and I'm not going to shut up about this, because these are moments in history in which you cannot shut up, and I will not shut up about this. There's always been a strategy. I am here as the person who comes from a political background, who has a media show. Some people talk about politics, but want to be in media. I am here to do whatever I can with whatever little audience I have, or big audience, it doesn't matter, to help you understand how these things work. Political science is a science. A big part of political science is building coalitions. Everybody wants to grow, not deplete. That's why infighting is really bad. That's why taking on your allies is really bad. You want to work with those things behind the scenes, and find a common ground. But at the end of the day, it's about coalition building for a broader goal. And right now, my broader goal is end this spread of fascism, because it is out of control. I don't know if the Biden administration has a sense of what's happening. I know that they do intellectually. I know that they had a democracy summit because they were worried about the spread of fascism abroad, and those little losses that Bannon had over the past couple of years were really nothing. Because the ideas are planted. You don't even really need Donald Trump anymore. You don't need Bill O'Reilly. They had that big rally in Orlando this week, and the stadiums didn't fill up. You don't need them. The ideas are planted. People can now say, I'm not a Trump person, but I'm a Jordan Peterson person. Guess what? It's the same idea. It's just a little different flavor. So depending on your personality, if you're really into, drinking supplements and macho culture, Joe Rogan might be your entrance point if you're on the left. And then the more you listen to him, you have no idea how you may have been affected by some of the ideas that he believes. And then, he brings on another person, whether it's an Alex Jones. They're preying on folks and their interests. The reason why the right wing is doing this is because demographically, they have been losing this game. 15 years ago, the Bushes invested in a plan because they were worried about losing demographics. They wanted to focus on Latinos, Hispanics in the South, whether it's the Southwest or Texas or Florida. And they lost that fight because you got this other crew who's more interested in preying on young white men. Not a new idea. This is always the path to radicalization. So you find your flavor of young white man, you touch a nerve with him, and you bring him in. You bring him into your coalition, whether they're conscious of it or not. Whether they're conscious of it or not. So I want to talk about really quickly how the Proud Boys are organizing locally. They're across the country organizing. The New York Times reported this this week, that they have regrouped and they're focusing on school boards and town councils, on running for school boards and town councils, as if the Koch brothers didn't do enough damage. This is why I will never shut up about this. This is why the Democrats have to do something. We have too much organizing there's just too much organizing for us to independently do to take these folks on. And we're all doing it. It's like a game of whack-a-mole. Even if they rebrand themselves, even if they restructure themselves, even if they're put on a terrorist list like they were in Canada, there's still going to be another version of them. They'll rebrand. They won't even be an actual legal entity anymore. The ideas are spreading. And when the Democratic Party is still structured the same way, I am like a broken record on this, and they're not investing locally and not building a pipeline, there's no alternative of ideas locally. And when every progressive is left to fend for themselves and build their own independent campaign and raise the money to compete with these people, even if they're less expensive races, we're just not winning at the rate that we need to combat the fascists. And I'm saying that, the fascists. Not to mention Washington's inability to confront those who stormed their offices and threatened to kill them or went to kill them. The coup that was organized internally and externally by the right wing. We can't depend on Washington anymore. So I am dedicating the next few months of the show to figuring out ways to combat these guys outside the box, not just depending on Washington, not just depending on traditional organizing structures, but what it's really going to take. Because running as a progressive today is a lot harder than it was 2 years ago. It is harder to raise money online. The algorithms are really, really skewed, as we've reported over and over on the show, towards these folks. I mean, why is it? I put up my show yesterday. I was watching it. And the next show was literally Steven Crowder. Like, that's how the algorithm fed our show. I know you guys have seen this. We have to combat it. We have to talk about it. And because this was just a taste of what's to come. All right, we have an amazing show today. We have the one and only Matt Bruenig on. He'll be right on after the break. And then after that, we have our favorite panelist. I say that every week, but Rep Rab from Philadelphia, representing the Northwest Philly, and Arun Chaudhary, live from Germany, where it's really happening right now. I can't believe we're saying this out loud and we're not scared. We will be right back after the short break. Welcome back to the Nomiki Show. We have Matt Bruenig here. Matt is, of course, the founder and president of the People's Policy Project. He's also, I would say every 4 months, you become a trending topic on Twitter. And I'm like, what now? Come on, guys. It's like, why? So how are you feeling right now? Let's just do a temperature check. This is my new thing.
Okay.
State of the world, how are you feeling?
Well, I've been following the Build Back Better bill. That's what I've been doing for the past 6 months. And, that's obviously taken a turn for the worse in a lot of ways. So, relative to where we were a few months ago, I guess I'm feeling pretty bad.
we're going to get into this, to what you wrote about. You have an article out that says universal benefits make sense, means testing doesn't. I can't believe we're still having this conversation. That was in Jacobin. But, you know, before we even get into the crux of it all, what parts of the Build Back Better bill were you surprised didn't make it in or weakened? I mean, I think we all expected there was going to be a lot of compromise, but like, what was some of the most alarming compromise?
So the child tax credit, you know, initially they were always going to kind of do this gimmick where it was only going to be on the books for a few years. But initially the proposal was to have it on the books for 5 or 6 years. And that would give it a lot of time to become somewhat permanent, perhaps, at least in the minds of Americans. It might make it a little bit harder to take it away. Now they've only got a 1-year extension. And it's really hard to imagine how it's going to be extended beyond that 1 year, if it even gets passed at this point. We don't know that. So they cut that way back. Paid leave, originally the paid leave proposal that Biden had put out, it was going to be a Social Security program. So just like old age pension or disability benefits, you know, you pay in and, you know, you apply for benefits. The Social Security Administration sends you a check. They changed it all up to make it primarily an employer-sponsored paid leave insurance program, very much like our healthcare system. Yep. And the federal government's just going to give money to employers so that they can buy private paid leave insurance. That's like the primary mechanism that you're going to get paid leave under the bill.
Wait, just a follow-up to that. Is this a new form of insurance? Does that exist already? Are they creating an entire industry out of this?
It exists. It's very, very small. Okay. So that's probably why, you know, you're not aware of it. But a few employers, you know, especially if they're big, they might be able to kind of set up a contract with mostly life insurers, weirdly, that run these things, and, you know, pay a certain amount per employee each month. And in exchange, if one of them needs leave, the employer will cover it. So similar to other kinds of insurance. But it's a very, very, very small industry. Now, it turns out that one of the big players in the industry is actually located in Congressman Richard Neal's district, and he is the kind of key player on the Ways and Means Committee. And so there seems to have been maybe a little lobbying there to kind of get it switched around to be more of a private paid leave insurance system than a public insurance system.
In terms of the Biden administration, you know, there's this reporting and sort of this energy, and even like in my own personal experiences, like off the record with people in offices or the actual leaders when I challenge them, there's this illusion, at least, that there has been friction between the administration and even maybe Senator Schumer and leadership with some of the people on these committees, like, you know, Representative Neal. Is that true, or is that just sort of a front? Do you get a sense?
I don't know. I'm not at that level of the discourse, I guess, or, you know, I don't have an insight into that. So, you know, whatever you read in Politico or yeah, Axia, sure, you know, that's what I have available too. So
I walked up to Senator Schumer. I was at an event, and I was like, I started to charm him. I was like, I was your intern when I was 16. And he's like, oh, because he loves his interns. Not in that way, but he loves, you know, as far as I know, at least, not me. And so, you know, he was really hooked. And then I was like, why aren't you doing anything about it? And he immediately was like, well, listen, I'm putting all the pressure on. We're doing it internally. I'm very frustrated with Joe Manchin and cinema. And then like, he really, because I'm just exasperated. I'm like, prove it. Show me. Don't see it.
Well, and the thing is that, you know, on the one hand, yeah, Manchin and Cinema can come in and kind of say, look, we want the whole thing scaled back. But then they're making these design decisions within the scaled back package that don't really make sense, like the one I was talking about. There's no reason why, like they cut the paid leave from 12 weeks to 4 weeks. Okay, I get it. If you're having to bring the cost of the bill down, that makes some sense. But what sense does it make to bring in the private life insurers to run the program? That's going to make it more costly than the alternative, you know? So it's stuff like that where there's really no defense for it, or even, you know, potential defense for it, in which you can kind of blame Manchin or Sinema. They're not calling for that kind of stuff, you know?
What is the most expensive part of the bill as of right now?
Well, it depends on how you group things. Usually people will group the pre-K and the childcare together, and they'll say that's the most expensive part of the bill. Of course, they are two separate programs as they're designed. So if you cut them up, then the SALT deduction, at least the one that pass the House would be more expensive than either of those two, but is less expensive than those two combined.
Okay, we're getting to your article, I promise, but just for folks, because you hear this jargon, thrown around a lot, and can you explain what SALT is? Like, why has it become such a controversial issue, especially in states like New York, where you have a lot of rural versus or suburban versus city voters?
Sure, yeah. So it's the state and local tax deduction. What it allows you to do is you can add up your property taxes and your state income tax. Theoretically, you could also add up your state sales tax, but I don't think anyone really does that. And you can reduce your income for federal income tax purposes by that amount. And therefore you save money because you don't have to pay as much taxes because your income shows up as less for federal purposes. And the problem with it is that in reality, unless you have a pretty high income, you're never going to claim the deduction because you're going to claim the standard deduction. And so it only really helps people who have income above a certain level, and it really helps people who have really high incomes because they pay much higher state and local tax, and because their marginal tax rate is higher because they're higher up in the income tax bracket. And so the higher up you are, the more value that the deduction brings you on a like dollar for dollar basis. So, and what has happened is a lot of the blue, it really showers a lot of money on affluent districts in blue states because those states will have higher taxes, and they also structure their taxes to be more income tax heavy and to a lesser extent property tax heavy. Whereas if you go into a state like Texas, for example, they have no state income tax. They do have a lot of rich people in Texas, especially around oil, but they have no state income tax. So you kind of don't even get to claim it that much in those states. So it became kind of a rich blue state thing. And then that creates this funny like wedge issue for Republicans to play around with, because on the one hand, blue state representatives want to help their states just bring more cash into the states. And on the other hand, blue Democrats are supposed to not be wanting to give away, tax cuts to the rich. But in this case, those two tensions are at odds. And so it creates an explosive, situation.
Yeah, I'm really shocked by how much it's become a wedge issue in New York State's perfect example, because you do have representatives like Tom Suozzi, who's now running for governor, who's made it his big issue because he represents parts of Long Island that are mainly Long Island that are wealthier and are very concerned with and a little bit more conservative. There's some like Trumpian waves in there. How much of this is is it a real issue or is it an aspirational issue? Meaning like people who think that this is going to affect them because they think they're like higher earners or want to be, versus like the reality of how many people this hits?
It's a very small percentage of people. Really the benefits are concentrated in the top 5% of tax filers. So most people, it doesn't matter unless you start reasoning the way I think some of these representatives do, in which you say, well, it matters to me because if the people in my district have more money, the rich people in my district have more money, then that could eventually benefit me. Maybe they'll spend more and employ me. And, I'm a home contractor, and for sure, they want nicer kitchens and nicer bathrooms, and I'll be able to go and lay the tile for them. Like, I think that's where some of the representatives end up going with it, but it seems a little bit far-fetched.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure if you're that rich, saving a few taxes is not going to, like, if you paying the taxes is not going to cut back on your like nice tiles. It's not that you would probably actually reduce your consumption. It's just that you may save less money, right? Because you kind of already max out your consumption at that point, at least for that kind of stuff. Maybe vacations or something like that where you can get very expensive, but kind of just consumer goods and durables that you put in your house, you kind of run out of that pretty quickly on how much you could actually spend, Billionaires, Hoarders Edition. Okay, so let's get to the crux of your article. Means testing. How did this become one of the major designs of? I guess like design's not the right word, but strategies of the Democratic Party. Like when did we go down the means testing route?
Oh, that's a good question. On some level, means testing, I guess, has always been with us. Technologically, it's only become possible more recently, right? I mean, before you have the income tax, you don't really have a good ability to know what people's incomes even are. And so we don't get that till 1913. So means testing before then wouldn't really make a lot of sense. And then even then, for a long time, it was only more affluent people who paid any income tax. Most people weren't even filing taxes. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess it really becomes more plausible starting in like the 50, maybe more like the 60s and 70s, and that's when you get some of the war on poverty programs like SNAP and Medicaid that are more heavily income tested.
So when you say
yeah.
most people weren't paying income taxes, you mean mainly the wealthy were paying income taxes up until the 60s, 70s?
Yeah, I mean,
Why
I
is
don't
that?
know the precise. Well, that's just how it was. The tax codes were written, and this is true in a lot of countries. At first, you don't need that much income. It's easy. You don't necessarily need that much revenue or don't want that much revenue, so you can raise it off of higher earners. It's also just kind of impractical for a lot of people who are working kind of informal jobs and stuff like that to necessarily tally this up. People forget, it's only very recently we have like all these computers and everything's tracked really well. Like it was a kind of an ordeal for a while to administer this kind of stuff. These days it seems easier, though it's often still quite error prone, but it seems easier because, well, you've got all your information. You go on your bank account, you can see everything you made. It's a lot more plausible that you could marshal this information to use these income tests. But I would say, like in general, and I mean this is true actually across all what they call like Anglo liberal societies, like Canada, UK, the US, and Australia. They all kind of went down the same path when it came to how they created their system of public benefits. And they all kind of bought into the notion that targeting the benefits through these income tests, where, if you make above a certain amount, you receive less benefit until you receive no benefit at all. That's sort of like an efficient way to spend money because you spend less money and you target that money to those who are most in need. And so there's a kind of like efficiency logic to it that really seemed to appeal to those countries for whatever reason, but did not end up appealing to continental and Northern Europe, which took different paths for the most part.
Can you define what means testing is?
Yeah, so the most common way to means test is with an income test. So means would just typically refer to income or wealth. So you could call it an income test or an asset test. And what they do is they say, hey, okay, we're going to provide a certain benefit to someone, let's say childcare or healthcare or whatever, but only people who have income below a certain level. And so if your income exceeds that level, you might get a diminished benefit, like a partial benefit, or you may get no benefit at all. So a Medicaid is a good example of the no benefit at all. It's kind of difficult to provide someone like sort of partial health care if they exceed it. So you get above a certain threshold and you just lose your health insurance. With child care subsidies, which is the subject of the piece that I wrote, you can kind of phase it out to some degree and say, hey, okay, if you make income over a certain threshold, we're just going to have you pay a certain fee. You'll pay $100 a month instead of $0 a month. And then that'll continue until, you pay the full unsubsidized amount. So that's two different approaches, but that's the basic idea. Reduce the amount of benefit you receive proportional to the income that you have or the wealth that you have in some cases.
So the argument you're making is that this does not work, especially in moments like this. And part of, just for folks who aren't aware, this program, child poverty is way higher than I think most people are aware of in this country. I think I just read something in New York. 1 out of, I want to say 6 children in New York are unhoused in the city. I believe it was 6. I want to fact check that. But I mean, you're saying that universal benefits in this piece are a much better path than means testing. I think this makes sense to a lot of folks, but please lay out your argument to us.
Yeah, so people, we have this argument over and over and over again, and, people talk about how it's simpler, which it is. People talk about how it's good politics, which it is. What I wanted to do in the piece was to point out that we don't need to, it's not just the case that on the one hand, you have the kind of moderates who are saying, hey, this is an efficient way to save money and target it. And on the other hand, you're like, yeah, but this is simple and it's better politics. It's actually from a purely distributive perspective, from a pure, does this make sense as a good way to save money? It doesn't even work in that context. And so what I try to point out as I kind of go through an illustration here, and this is part of the Build Back Better bill. I don't use the same numbers in the bill, but that's kind of why I wrote it.
David, is there any way to zoom in a little bit so we can see it a little closer?
And so so one approach here is to say, hey, we're going to save money on childcare subsidies by not giving them to rich people. Right, so rich families will have to pay for their own childcare. You go, oh, that's great. Okay, so how much are we going to save? And so what I do in the piece is I say, let's define rich as $200,000 of income or more. That puts you in the top 10% of the income distribution in the U.S. And let's say we charged all the kids below the age of 3 who live in those households. We made them all, their parents pay the entire unsubsidized price of childcare. And in this case, I put it at $25,000, which is an estimate that is similar to what people think might be the result of the Build Back Better legislation. Okay, you do the math on that, and it's $36 billion a year. So in a sense, by cutting off the rich, you save $36 billion a year because you don't have to cover that. They cover it themselves. And so what I point out in the piece is this is kind of an interesting accounting exercise, like the language we use here. But what you're actually doing is, as part of building revenue for your childcare system, you are imposing a $36 billion bill on rich people with incomes over $200,000. Okay, great. Should they contribute $36 billion to the childcare system? Absolutely. I would say much more than that. But okay, fine. But you're actually only imposing that bill on rich families that currently have children below the age of 3. Wow. And that's only a small fraction of rich people. So that's what this table shows. If you look at all rich families, there's 12.8 million rich families, again defined as income over $200,000. If you only look at rich families below the age of 3, it drops to 1.2 million. So the real question that we're answering when we're saying, should we means test it or provide it universal, is how are we going to distribute this $36 billion cost across rich families? Are we going to use a tax on all rich families, or are we going to use a user fee, a childcare fee, a daycare fee only on rich families below the age of 3? And so that's what this shows. Here's what this, the difference, how what it actually nets out to. If you impose the $36 billion only on families with kids below the age of 3, it costs those families an average of $31,000 a year, which is like 10% of their income. If you impose that $36 billion across all rich families, including those that don't currently have kids below the age of 3, it costs each of them about $2,700 a year, less than 1% of their income. Exactly. And you're still getting the same amount of money out of the same rich group of people. It's just that you're spreading it out across the whole group, and that comes with all sorts of advantages. And so even from a pure just dollars and cents, what's the most efficient way to do this? The universal benefit funded with the tax instead of a means tested benefit that implicitly uses user fees to fund, it still comes out on top.
So, I mean, is there a way even, let's play devil's advocate here. You're in your New York City family, you're making $200,000 a year, you're considered rich nationally, but in New York by city standards, everything from, there are childcare, there's pre-K obviously, and well, not obviously, I don't know how many people know that. But, the cost of living is obviously higher in New York and San Francisco and Miami. And so some families might feel like $2,700 or obviously $30,000 is quite a bit for them. Is there a progressive aspect to this?
I mean, you can always make it more progressive by taxing more from the rich. And that's something you can't do with the user fee, right? If you're saying, hey, everyone over this income, we're going to charge them they're just going to pay daycare fees. And those daycare fees are $25,000. Well, then it's $25,000 for someone who makes $200,000 a year, and it's $25,000 for someone who makes $1 million a year, right? Because you're using a fee, which is a flat dollar amount. When you start bringing in the tax code, then you can make it more progressive and use percentages of income or even escalating percentage of income with the progressive income tax. You can also do that. And the piece I was trying to just be very narrow and say, look, let's say you don't even do that. Let's say it's, I'm trying to as apple to apples as you can possibly have it. And I'm not smuggling in other kinds of arguments or other kinds of what if I structured the fee a little bit differently. Let's just perfectly equal. Which would you prefer? And like clearly the universal benefit comes out on top. And you raise the same amount of money. You don't save any money by means testing. It's just a different way of bringing the money into the system, whether fees or taxes.
Have you gotten any feedback from lawmakers, people in staffers, people in the space?
I mean, there are the members that know this, right? There's the more left-wing members who have grown up on this, whether because they read these articles, I mean, you think about AOC or Bowman or Omar, they're all very, very pro-universal benefits. Bernie Sanders is as well. Obviously, they're a small percentage of the Congress. And the problem that you have with this, and I try to kind of drive this home in the piece a little bit, is the way that we do accounting in the way that we think about government budgets and stuff like that ends up that is like the source of the brain rot that causes people not to get this, because if you offload it as a user fee, then that counts as less spending. And it's not less spending, it's just you're shifting the spending to the household that then has to pay it with a user fee. It's not less spending. It also shows up as less taxes. But again, it's not really less taxes. It's just you're converting the tax into a fee. Those people still have to pay the same amount of money, except instead of paying it into central government, which then pays it to the childcare provider, they pay it directly to the childcare provider. But like those differences in the way that like what columns they go into in various spreadsheets, I mean, it makes all the difference in the world to certain legislators and really most people who write about politics. They can't get their head around like
Mind warp, yeah. These
are accounting conventions. They're helpful to a degree, but understand what they really mean and what the actual practical upshot of them are.
Could this, continuing on this path of like mind warping lawmakers and reporters, could this happen at the state or local level?
Happen what in particular? Free childcare?
Yeah. I mean, there's obviously New York City's done a lot of stuff around this. There's earned income tax credits in California and partially New York. Like, could this happen locally?
Sure. I mean, especially pre-K and childcare are obvious extensions of K through 12, right? And it could be done by a similar kind of body. Now, the states that have done it have taken somewhat different approaches. But absolutely, I mean, there's no reason why you couldn't basically take the K through 12 service and extend it down, and that's already administered locally. Now, if this bill passes and it becomes like you have to participate in this federal scheme, then it might get a little bit more complicated, and now you have to, operate within the confines of the federal system, at least if you want to get federal funds. And so, I mean, interestingly, like the bill could end up crowding out I don't know, a state or jurisdiction that wanted to do free childcare, because it would be, if they did it, not only would they have to pay for all of it, but now they have to forego federal funds, because the only way you get the federal funds is if you participate in the system. And, it's like with single payer, right? When states want to try to do single payer, and it's like, oh my God, we get so much federal money for Medicaid and Medicare, and like we'd have to replace all of that, yet we're still paying taxes for it. It just, you get enmeshed in that federal system. So
that's fascinating. And then even this is set to expire, so it's like, okay, 1 year, 2 years of federal funding on this, but at the end of the day, the long-term benefits of course outweigh all that.
Yep.
Hello, America. Matt, really, really interesting work. Tell me more about what you're doing. How long have you been over at the People's Policy Project?
We started in 2017, so 4 years, a little over 4 years.
What's, what are you working on over there?
It's all Build Back Better all the time. It has been pretty much the entire year. But the assumption is the assumption that was already going to be over, but that will pass. Right now, it doesn't really make sense to do anything else because it's just completely sucking all the air out of everything. You wouldn't get any attention for anything you did. But once that passes, we're going to be in a pretty dark period, I would assume, looking at the polls, and it doesn't seem like we have any chance to pass anything else. The midterms are coming, and it doesn't look good for the Democrats. So we're going to shift to municipal and state level proposals. And we got a number of those already in the canister ready to go. We just have to pick a strategic time to publish them,
Fantastic. Matt Bruenig, always pleasure. Come back soon. Thanks for breaking down really complicated things for most Americans to understand, like accounting practices, and including reporters, by the way. So really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care.
The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. Yeah. Clash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, fake fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show.
Hey, welcome back to the Nomiki Show. All right, so I am so excited about this. In about a month and a half, Matriarch organization is going to be hosting a national training for working class women who are thinking about running for office, including their staff. A lot of folks who have gotten into politics over the last few years want to understand how to run a successful campaign. This is the time. I am of the belief that working class women are warriors against these fascists, locally all the way to the national level. We see what's happening. We see how they're highlighting and they're taking on the far right is really taking on the Squad and women in Congress to the point where it's extraordinarily dangerous for them. And yet they continue to fight for fairness and equality and economic justice, gender justice, racial justice. They're out there putting their lives literally on the lines. As I'm not saying that figuratively. They have death threats coming in all the time. And there was a coup, of course. Or attempted coup. So with that being said, Matriarch is stepping it up a notch. In 2020, Matriarch supported federal candidates. It was a great first year. One of Matriarch's founding members was Cori Bush, and she, of course, got elected and shocked the world and really went right into Congress, not holding back, with so much courage, earning the respect of not just progressives, but so many other Congress members across the board. On January 29th, Matriarch is hosting this training. And what's unique about this training is that it's really leaning in on the systemic barriers that working women face when they run. It takes a woman an average of 3 times to run before they win. Now, that statistic is from when most of the women that were running or winning had institutional support, financial support. Many of them were of the means that it was a little bit easier to create a viable campaign. Viability meant having the money to be able to run a campaign and be competitive. But when you've had a record number of women run over the last 5 years, whether it was 2016 or 2018 or 2020, we've seen a record number of women run and a record number win. But we've also seen a record number lose. That's not a bad thing. Because you learn. Every single time you run, you learn, and you're organizing on the ground. And more importantly, you're getting that message out there, that progressive message. Democrats, of course, really pulled out of local races, and there's a vacuum. And the vacuum is now being taken over by folks like the Proud Boys, who are organizing at the state and local level, all the way down to school boards. Well, guess what? We can do that too. I don't think the Proud Boys know more about education than a woman does, or a mom does, or a teacher does, or a nurse does, or somebody who's been involved in the community. You know, we said we were supporting our frontline workers in 2020. We said during the pandemic, you know, we are there with them. Well, let's really be there with them. If you are a frontline worker, if you are a working woman, a nurse, a teacher, an Amazon worker, a Starbucks worker, if you are interested in running, if you've been involved locally, if you know someone who's extraordinary, urge them to come to this training. This training is on January 29th. It is free. It is a free training, and everything from the playbook of how to run a successful campaign, how to build coalitions, how to run while you're working, how to run while you're not working, how to run while you have childcare issues. You know, can you pay for childcare through your campaign funds? Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. We are going to go through all of that. What do you do when you're attacked by the right? What do you do when you're attacked by the Democrats? What do you do when somebody lies about you? We are going to talk about all of these issues during the training and so much more. But really important, before the end of the year, we are trying to raise $30,000 to make sure that this training hits as many women as possible. If you can support in any way to help this goal, about halfway there. We have 2 weeks left before the end of the year, 2 weeks to hit $30,000. This is what makes this training free. There are platform fees. There's, fees to conduct the training. The money goes straight to the training. So when you're contributing, you are making a huge difference. We want to make sure that this training is free. We want to make sure that it runs smoothly. And we want to make sure that we can do many of them next year, because this is just the first one. But, I have no doubt that there are going to be things that pop up, and we're going to do another training. And we're using a lot of the lessons that we learned in the last few cycles in this training, because campaigns have shifted, the strategies have shifted, and we want to make sure that as many women as possible are equipped. We're doing what the Koch brothers have been doing, but we're doing it in a different way. So if you're, stop relying on the Democrats, okay, stop relying on these PACs to endorse candidates. Endorsements are great, but we want to train. We want to teach candidates how to run effective campaigns and be competitive. And it might take a few shots. It did with Cori Bush. Remember that. So forget about win records. This is a Democratic talking point. They go to donors and they say, the donors say, well, what's your win record? Well, guess what? The Democrats' win record has not been great. So let's try a different way. My belief is the frontline women are the front lines against fascists right now. So let's take them on. Support Matriarch PAC and C4. We've got the link up there. Go to bit.ly/trainwomen, all lowercase, train women, WOMEN, train women. All right, guys, we'll be right back with our incredible panel and a few shout outs.
The Nomiki Show. We clash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, fake fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show.
Hey, we're back. Little breaking news. Rep Rab is in session. The Republicans are holding him hostage in there because it's the end of the year. But that's okay, because we get one-on-one time with the one, the only Arun Chaudhary. You know Arun, of course, from the committee program. But of course, he is a reoccurring panelist on our show. He's a political filmmaker. He's the host of the committee and runs the committee. And is advising all of the left that are taking on the extreme right across Europe. You're saving us.
Darn
hopefully.
trying.
You're
Darn trying, because I do think, and we've talked about this before, we'll talk about it again, but it's a situation that what happens here ends up in the U.S. much more than what happens in the U.S. ends up here in terms of politics. And I will say the scariest part about that, I shouldn't hold this random pointy thing while I'm making points. That's a bad communications tactic. Thing I'll say about that's scary is while you see things like in the wellness community sort of nibbling around the edges of far right extremism here, in Europe that's much farther along, and places like rural Austria, you will see the birthing of youthful eco-fascist movements.
No, it's I'm so glad you're saying this, because I feel like the show, I've already said this at the top of the show, this is like, we're leaning in on this now. I don't think people understand. It's not just that the far right is growing. They may not have won all the seats in the U. Bannon's project never went away. He planted the seeds. And as I said that, just a few minutes ago, I said, while it takes a woman 3 times to run before they win, these guys, it takes usually 1 time, sometimes twice. They're planting the seeds. They don't give up. They invest in the pipeline. They're educating people in colleges, and they're trying to reach people wherever they are and bring them in. And Steve Bannon said this in The Brink, openly on air, to a reporter from The Guardian, saying, you've got 20% of the audience that I want. You've got 20, meaning the left. And he's going to figure out whatever way to get those folks in bed with him. And
even just a couple is good, because you're funneling directly from the opponent into your own pipeline. And it's very rare in politics to be able to do that. And so this kind of Bannon pipeline, I guess we can call it, is one of the more remarkable pieces of politics in the 21st century.
And horrifying. And all he does, I urge people to watch The Brink. I think it's on maybe Hulu or something. It's a documentary, came out maybe 3 years ago, and it was about, or 2 years ago, about the his EU, like the planting the seeds for his right wing training camp, I guess.
And at some point, the master and the teacher is reversed, right? Because Tucker Carlson doesn't go visit Viktor Orban to lend Orban credibility. He's the goddamn head of state of a major EU country. It is quite the opposite.
Yep.
So you see actually where power is flowing from.
And in The Brink with Bannon, he's sitting there at a table with world leaders talking about building coalitions between Orban, building coalitions with Duterte, and obviously people have lost power, but the ideas have not gone away. These are vehicles. No. These candidates are vehicles for movements that spread up and down. They can be official organizations or unofficial. The ideas are there. The actions are there. You were in the White House in the Obama White House, of course. You were the
first term,
videographer. I said this on air last night. I remember when Barack Obama did not take ISIS seriously. And I know the left loves when we bring up ISIS, but hear me out. Every radical organization has always targeted young men, right? But the difference between ISIS back then was it wasn't a centralized organization like some of the other groups that were a little bit more top down, or they were networked in a different type of way. And this is all as the rise of the internet was happening. It didn't matter if they were official, if they had a legal entity, how they were the money was coming from somewhere, but it's so convoluted now. It's so easy to hide money and move money in different places, whether it's moving it through crypto or moving it through 25 different entities or holding it in real estate. We don't know where it's coming from. But what's so interesting about Bannon was he was sitting there saying, I don't care who pops up and where they pop up from. I want to build it. Meanwhile, the former CEO of Goldman Sachs is sitting at that table talking about these ideas in a very legitimate way. And you're like, what? This is out in the open. And we're sitting here in America, oh, well, Bannon's out, so he doesn't matter anymore. And, it's no big deal. This is he lost his experiment. The Proud Boys are literally organizing locally right now to run for election. Whether they're an organization or not, they're people.
This stuff is always going to be attractive to powerful interests. It's always going to have the table tilted. It's always going to have that little extra zing. And so it is just so beholden upon Democrats, other center-left parties globally, not to let the Bannons of the world run at them from the left, right? This is one of the reasons, people forget in the Cold War, one of the reasons we ran more of a welfare state in the Cold War was that there was a world power of socialism that folks were, vaguely worried about physically conquering the world. And when that went away, we felt like we didn't have to worry about that kind of thing anymore. But what we see more and more is that letting folks run at the left is what is creating this power, and we openly let that happen with the platforms we choose. And when I say we, I'm being general, but on the center left, these are we're having bad outcomes from choices that are being made.
So speaking of, bad outcomes from choices we've made, you think that folks storming Congress and trying to kill our politicians would maybe scare the politicians into actually doing something, but of course not. There are much scarier things like losing donors or whatever the hell, keeps them up at night. I want to play this clip of Liz Cheney, who has somehow become our leftist hero of the day. Like, I wish the left had as much courage as Liz Cheney has taking on her own party. I'm like,
I mean, it's just amazing how freeing being kicked out of whatever power structure you're in is. Yes. So we don't agree with Liz Cheney, but we like anyone in that position. Their attitude and the kind of what energy and truth that they bring is always going to be a satisfying meal. Absolutely.
So she, of course, was reading text messages that were uncovered when Mark Meadows, the former chief of staff to Donald Trump, was going to testify, but now he is not. But he at least did provide a lot of information, documentation, bunch of stuff. And we're just starting. So let's play this clip of Liz Cheney.
Texts, including from Trump administration officials, urged immediate action by the president. Quote, POTUS has to come out firmly and tell the protesters to dissipate. Someone is going to get killed. In another, Mark, he needs to stop this now. A third, in all caps, tell them to go home. A fourth, and I quote, POTUS needs to calm this shit down. Indeed, according to the records, multiple Fox News hosts knew the president needed to act immediately. They texted Mr. Meadows, and he has turned over those texts. Quote, Mark, the president needs to tell people in the Capitol to go home. This is hurting all of us. He is destroying his legacy, Laura Ingraham wrote. Please get him on TV. Destroying everything you have accomplished, Brian Kilmeade texted. Quote, can he make a statement? Ask people to leave the Capitol, Sean Hannity urged. As the violence continued, one of the president's sons texted Mr. Meadows, quote, he's got to condemn this shit ASAP. The Capitol Police tweet is not enough, Donald Trump Jr. texted. Meadows responded, quote, I'm pushing it hard, I agree. Still, President Trump did not immediately act. Donald Trump Jr. texted again and again, urging action by the president. Quote, we need an Oval Office address. He has to lead now. It has gone too far and gotten out of hand.
Got a little out of hand.
A little bit out of hand. I think we're going to play another clip from her as well.
Mr. Meadows received numerous text messages that he has produced without any privilege claim urging President Trump to take action. I read a number of those last night to the nation. Here are a few others from Republican members. Quote, it is really bad up here on the Hill. Another one, the president needs to stop this ASAP. Another one, fix this now. And as we saw last night, dozens of texts, including from Trump administration officials, from members of the press, from Donald Trump Jr., urged immediate action by the president. But we know hours passed with no action by the president to defend the Congress of the United States from an assault while we were trying to count electoral votes.
So, Arun, you've worked in the White House before.
Yes.
Let's just imagine the same exact thing. A right-wing plot from the outside were to happen, and folks storm the Capitol. There's like a chain of command. I mean, if say Sasha Obama were to text chief of staff to the White House, Rahm Emanuel or whoever was chief of staff at the time.
Yeah.
How does this work? I mean, can Sasha just not text her father? Like, who how does this normally work?
Right. So, I mean, look, I cannot tell you how the Trump family works, and maybe it's, worse than I think it is, but I believe that Donald Jr. has access to his father via text message, via all, Twitter DMs, like however it is they talk, they're talking. The fact that he is going to Mark Meadows, and the fact that everyone's using his name Mark so constantly. This is Golda, by the way.
And Golda's Tushy.
Yeah, totally. The fact that everyone's going out of their way, I think, shows you that they've already tried to directly reach out to the president, who's not inaccessible, right? He's not a guy in a golden palace. He's always willing to talk to a reporter, always willing to pick up the phone and call and yell and be crazy with whoever, right? Accessibility is not his thing. So clearly he had made his mind up. And there's nothing a chief of staff can really do. But the chief of staff absolutely has as much access as you could possibly want to the president, especially this president who's a homebody, who's hanging out in his office, or possibly in the residence. Like the chief of staff's physical office is attached, so they don't have to go through any corridors. The chief of staff is supposed to be everywhere at all times. The chief of staff literally has access to things saying like the medical condition of the president at all times. So this is a question of the president made a decision that you see a lot of people making, which is, am I a Republican or am I a Trump person? Who am I dancing with? Who brought me? And I think you see, and I'm having this idea as we're talking, and Golda's helping me with it, but it feels like Mark Meadows is playing this perfectly by releasing text messages, which lets him sort of be part of the process, but then not speaking, which lets him sort of be a tough guy, sort of in the middle. And if you're a Trump person, which a majority of America basically, the bet folks are making is these aren't text messages that you're like, these people are asking for something dumb. It sort of makes establishment Republican media figures and establishment figures look sort of
right.
And you can see, as you see people making this decision over and over again, like, do I go with Trump or do I go with mainstream Republicans? Mainstream Republicans lose that argument just about every time. And this is just another case of that.
I think what this also reveals is, there's always been this question about whether or not Trump is acting independent because he's made some sort of deal with the devil, or he's just a maniac, or both. But like, when the impeachment was happening, this was a major question. How much was Trump, an independent person who may have made decisions on his own, or how much was his family looped into those decisions? And I think it's really interesting that, even family members are not on the same page with their father, which is, weird. Like, it's gone too far. I mean, that to me seems like they were at least conscious of the fact that they had, of course they were conscious. There was an organized rally outside, but did they know that they were going to be storming the Capitol?
It's sort of a game of chicken, right? And they all bailed out at a sensible time and pulled off into the shoulder. But that's not how Trump plays the game, right? Mm-hmm. He's like, no, never lost by going full bore ahead. Right. And so, I think you are separating kind of what makes Donald Trump special is, what Danton would say, daring, right? Like just the one who dares wins.
So I want to, our dear friend Ben Dixon from the Benjamin Dixon Show has created this compilation. David, who works with Ben as well. Let's play this clip of the hypocrisy of the Fox News hosts, who of course were like, it's too far. And then like half a beat later, hey, ratings.
Get a text from Brian Kilmeade on Fox and Friends. These are not phonies. We can personally confirm that. Whether you like them or not, they're real.
Please get him on TV. Destroying everything you have accomplished, Brian Kilmeade texted.
I do not know Trump supporters that have ever demonstrated violence that I know of in a big situation.
Quote, Mark, the president needs to tell people in the Capitol to go home. This is hurting all of us. He is destroying his legacy. Laura Ingraham.
An overwhelming majority of them, more than 99% had to be, were peaceful.
Quote, can he make a statement? Ask people to leave the Capitol, Sean Hannity urged.
And we had the reports that groups like Antifa other radical groups, I don't know the names of all of them, that they were there to cause trouble.
In a weak attempt to smear yours truly, and presumably, I guess, President Trump, Congresswoman Cheney presented one of my text messages from January 6th to Mark Meadows. Surprise, surprise, surprise. I said to Mark Meadows the exact same thing I was saying live on the radio at that time and on TV that night on January 6th and well beyond January 6th. And by the way, where is the outrage in the media over my private text messages being released again publicly? Do we believe in privacy in this country? Apparently not. I am an honest, straightforward person. I say the same thing in private that I say to all of you. Liz Cheney
I'm an honest,
knows
straightforward
this.
person.
She doesn't seem to
favorite.
care. She's interested in one thing and one thing only: smearing Trump and purging him from the party.
Does that sound like I was downplaying it to you?
Oh my God.
Now, but it was not an insurrection. To say anything different is beyond dishonest, and it ignores the facts of that day.
This is going to work.
I mean, yeah, it'll work for them. This is okay. I think we have a good sense of what's going on here. Arun, I mean, when you say it's going to work, is it going to work on all of the Fox audience? Is it going to work? Because I think people, just pulling back a little bit on the Fox audience, people, I think in centrist world and center to center, left to left, think that the Fox audience is like all of the Trumpsters. But the reality is, you know,
It's just the folks who watch the news also.
It's just the folks who watch the news. It's in the airports, it's at the gyms.
Yeah. It's
And
ubiquitous.
many of them don't like Trump, and yet Fox is leaning in so hard on Trump and potentially, you know, losing their center right folks that are, I mean, I think they might be going too far because
I don't
so worried.
think so.
Really?
I don't know. You're not making an incorrect point, right? And maybe if it was more, like, that could be true, but too much time has passed. I feel like the history book with, you know, Viking helmet guy photo, like, has already kind of been written. And this sort of reminds me of impeachment 1 and impeachment 2, of like digging in on hypocrisy and things that, you know, seem clear, and, you know, and you're like, why doesn't anyone care about this? And it's because each time the opinion has already been cemented first, right? Like that redacted weird Mueller report that was like, everything's fine, right? And it turned out actually some of it wasn't that great. But like, you know, that was what stuck. You know, next time, not guilty. That's what stuck. I think this time, like, you know, the idea that there's something impolite happened, that something maybe even dangerous happened because of improper security protocols in place, is something that the Fox audience can understand and accept, we can move in on. Be like, Trump acted badly by not intervening also. But I think that what all of this will add up to them ultimately not punishing Republicans, the Republican media, or Donald Trump for January 6th as being any kind of motivating factor in any kind of voting outcome.
I mean, I hear you on that, and of course the most notable way of holding people accountable is holding the people accountable who are just like the individuals who they don't care about. So whether it's the Viking dude or other folks who were in the insurrection, who are now going to be in prison, you know, via the FBI's investigation, sure, they should be held accountable. They were bad actors, like really bad, dangerous actors. Simultaneously, you know, those who were involved, the lawmakers rarely ever are held accountable. In terms of politically, I mean, I could be wrong, but like my perspective on this is, so say, let's just be very generous. Say of the Fox audience, 50%, maybe 40%, that's really generous, I think, are loyal Trump people. I don't think that's true. I think maybe 20, and they're very vocal. And then there's, you know,
20, that's right.
Yeah, like there's, and that's, by the way, a very scary number. 20% of the Fox audience is loyal Trumpsters. I have family members who are Republican in Arizona who watch Fox News all day long, love Bill O'Reilly, even though he's not on anymore. You know, and I say that because Bill O'Reilly just did an event in Orlando with Trump. They have all of Bill O'Reilly's books. They despise Trump, and they will never vote for Trump, and they haven't voted for Trump. They have guns. They want lower taxes. They're Republicans. I won't even say they're center-right Republicans. They're Republicans. They're conservative Republicans. But Trump is just too much, too over the top. So I do think that is, I mean, and they voted for Joe Biden. Like, I don't know how that happened. My brain kind of exploded.
Yes, but more Republicans voted for Hillary Clinton than voted for Joe Biden.
Correct. 100% correct. And I don't think, well, not more Republicans total percentage wise, because don't
Percentage
forget,
wise.
more
Yeah.
people
But
voted
she
in.
peeled more layers off the onion,
Exactly. Which, again, people's brains explode when they hear that. But that part of that is because the Trump experiment kept growing and growing. And it might have grown even more so. And we're not really sure yet where
And it's
going.
polarization, right? So
Yeah.
when it comes to you hate this guy, but are you on the team?
Right.
The right wing has the team. I mean, I'll just give you the global equivalent that we find so frustrating working in Italy. Bellwether of the world, as we say, right? You have two teams, even though they have lots of parties, they add up to roughly two teams that are very close in strength. But when you add up the two largest right parties, La Lega and Fratelli d'Italia, who are both really solid, conservative, horrible parties. I'm going to forget like Forza, like Berlusconi's kind of center-right thing. Like it adds up to the number. Like it adds up to every single person knows they're both on the same team, and that's number. And whenever you put the 5 stars and PD together, there's too much of the I won't vote for the other one. I don't care about the. So their alliance is weaker than the sum of its parts, and we see that all over the place, right? Where the alliance on the right is equal or greater to the sum of its parts, because everybody does bring a friend. They do go to the church group. They do get 3 more people. They do the work, Or I forgot how I was going to finish that sentence. I think you know what I'm saying though.
Or yeah. I mean, we get you. Okay, speaking of, you are in Germany, and I woke up this morning and I saw the news that the far right is organizing in Germany. A great thing to lead your day off with. Now that they haven't been there for a while, and it's just a little bit like more open. It used to be like little, behind the closet, not as aggressively open. Far right's organizing Germany to around the vaccine mandate and going after politicians. Can you just kind of give me a sense of this is scroll up a little bit. German raids on COVID extremists over Saxony leader death plot. So the part that really sticks out to me is COVID extremists. This is now a political, like they're threatening leaders with death. Like what level of insanity?
Also just from the from the Department of the Banality of Evil, the reason we get COVID extremists in the headline is because reporters have had to write this headline so many different times and doesn't know how else to describe these people, right? Because you had one of these in Rotterdam where the cops actually had to shoot 7 or 9 people, which in Europe is not something that cops normally do. You had in Rome huge ones in the Czech Republic. So there is increasingly a wave of right-wing extremism mixed with vaccine skepticism just fomenting. And I think folks in America are always surprised to hear how strong conspiracy and QAnon stuff, etc., is in Europe, specifically in Germany. Germans love a good QAnon kind of conspiracy style thing. And when you have the Americans do too. There's something that we're looking for this sort of superstructure. I don't know exactly what it is, but you do that fueled with the fact that things when they are Nazis involved happen big here because they're good at Nazi stuff. There's lots of actual Nazis, especially in portions of the East and stuff. And so these demonstrations that maybe don't get as much play although they're just as far right, just as scary in Rome, are happening here in Germany. And they actually have like real Nazis with real Nazi stuff there. And it's terrifying. I mean, I will tell you just, an anecdote that does not need to be an example of anything, but the way it all gets so convoluted. I mean, more than this happens every day. But but my kids, we're all Jewish. We're called Jewish Nazis because they were wearing masks. Right. So this is like.
Okay, so this is very important.
They're like, you're a Jewish Nazi.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've been tweeting about this, and it's interesting because I'm not backing down on this anymore. I've been a little bit afraid of getting into the whole like fights online with the left because they just come for you and it gets really aggressive, but it's too far. It's like people are dying, because we have a pandemic that will never go away because it's become a political identity. But again, back to Bannon, which you're very familiar with, and I feel like I'm, at least at a 301 level class on Bannon, but you've got like a master's in Bannon mindset and understanding what his strategies are. I say this because they have co-opted so many different terms to do this mental jujitsu on people where when I would go on Fox News like 8 years ago, they did a little bit of this. But it's really gone above, they would say like, oh, you're a socialist. That's how the Nazis were socialists. But now it's like you have right wingers saying that, we're the fascists. Rudy Giuliani going out there and saying Joe Biden is a fascist because of the mandates. I mean, he doesn't say that directly, but that's what he's alluding to.
And this is an age thing.
Alluding to.
And this is an age thing, right? I think this sounds a bit silly to us, and we're like, oh, that's crazy, and Jewish Nazis, ha ha. But it's for that audience of angry young men, right? Who like are looking for something, hate things, no authority is bad. It's like, yeah, Joe Biden is a fascist. They haven't even gotten to the part where Jews run the world yet, but like they'll get there. It's like, but the entry is just like, I don't like my general authority, and somebody's got a quick and easy answer of why that is,
right? With
words that I understand.
Exactly. Q sent him. Look at this. Okay, so the rise of the right is very alarming in Germany, and of course everywhere else. And
like we said before, tied to the wellness, and so that's where this becomes, kind of the anti-vaxxing. But sorry, go ahead.
No, but this is important because they're trying to meet people where they are, and so if they find a really key aspect to this is, of course, what you just said. Tapping into somebody's distrust of institutions. Institutions, the stats are out there. This isn't like, you don't have to do any sort of mental gymnastics to get there. Trust in institutions is an all-time low. Every year just gets a little bit lower. And when you pair that up with income inequality being where it's at, and of course, the internet, which helps facilitate things much, much faster, and the internet being owned by monopolies that are at least center right and sometimes even further right. So there's not very much oversight into how fast an idea or a conspiracy can spread. These networks can grow at a much faster rate than, say, like the late 30s. Which was real organizing, and and there was propaganda then too, which you understand. So the wellness community is weird because it's not young men, which is
no.
There's a lot of young women. I have seen personally, and I'm part of that wellness space. I've seen personally friends of mine who are not young women. They're in their mid-40s. They do yoga sometimes twice a day. They, basically live on raw diets. They're probably better off economically than most people. I know one in particular is sort of famous as being a writer, and has just turned into a total, doesn't believe in the vaccines, but it's melded. It's gone into this other space where she's not a Trumpster, it doesn't seem, but she doesn't believe in the wokeness of the internet now. And I'm like, oh no, we've lost her. She's gone. She has totally gone from being a Hillary Clinton supporter to this. So this concerns me. It's like, it's not our normal pathway, but there's something in her that's insecure about society and distrusting. And then we end up there.
I mean, false sort of medicine and fears on things like, just anxiety about health has been at the center of so many bad political movements, cults, just over and over again. That kind of bodily anxiety and search for an answer is just something that, when paired with low information on the internet, is the concoction that is killing us.
Right. So on this note, I want to actually ask you, because you have a lot of experience in politics. Dr. Oz, who hosts a show for 13 years, has millions and millions of viewers a week. He has been challenged for some of his medical takes. He still conducts surgeries, I believe open heart surgeries, if I'm correct, once a week. So he is a very good surgeon. He started going on Oprah after she met him, and of course developed a following on Oprah 20 years ago. And then she gave him a show. I listened to a whole podcast on him, like a long podcast on like the questionable background of Dr. Oz. He's a legitimate doctor.
He's a real doctor, right? Not doctor. He's not Dr. Phil, right? Who's like, I think, who's like a doctor of English literature or something. Yeah. He's like a doctor.
He's a doctor. And why this is concerning is because when you put a doctor into the space of television news, one person said, if you're in the medical space, medical journals maybe publish one really transformative thing a year, and it's like not anything that you would be shocked by. It's like, drink more water, you'll be healthy. So it doesn't play well on TV. So his wife, family is really into the holistic movement, and her father is a doctor as well. So he started leaning into this holistic space, which, challenging Western medicine is not a bad thing. I mean, I think a lot of us understand that there are a lot of studies on the health benefits of yoga, on eating a balanced diet, on cutting meat. All of that stuff is indisputable at this point. But then he gets into weird things like, because of the TV way of looking, of amplifying these stories, is like, this green tea thing or green coffee is going to change your life and you're going to lose. You don't have to do anything else. It's like, well, there's no studies.
2 steps from Gwyneth Paltrow, right? It's the same shit.
Yep. So I'm that's sort of the premise. He had to testify before Congress about some of these, these pushes, and how folks on the internet will take advantage of him and even put his name on something to sell products. But it's a weird dance. Flash forward, he is now running for U.S. Senate.
Madonna.
In Pennsylvania, even though he's from Southern Jersey, but that's, I guess, part of Pennsylvania.
It's close enough. Yeah,
close enough for folks who live down there. You understand. At a time when the war is against Dr. Fauci, and he gives a speech, his first speech, his announcement speech, is about how you really need to take personal ownership of your life, and the government is basically, taking too much control. And this is coming from a doctor. What does this mean?
It's horrible. It's horrible because he's a real doctor, and because he's smart about how he has kind of gone into grifterism, and now political grifterism, first just commercial, in that he doesn't do it all at once. It's like a bit, and you don't see the fish tank getting dirtier, right? Like, he's gone from being a normal doctor who cares about women's health care enough to be supportive of reproductive freedoms to someone who is now okay with Roe v. Wade getting overturned, but not all at once, right? He did it in like 4 kind of different gradual moves to get there. So I think he is a smart man with not a great moral center who is following where the money and energy is. And I think he's got a shot at this race.
And then what does that mean? I mean, not just the fact that, say he wins or doesn't win, it doesn't matter. The fact that he has so much money and he's going to be bringing in so much money, it sort of, doesn't it legitimize?
It's going to be him on steroids, right? Behind so many things that are bad, whether it's how smoking kept going on forever without anyone sort of really talking about it. There's always one doctor behind it, right? Whether it's the autism scare about vaccines, there's always one crooked doctor behind it. And when that one crooked doctor is in the Senate, that's a problem. Because we have had people who are crooked but are not crooked doctors in the Senate, and it's actually been a little better than if they hadn't been doctors. I'm thinking, what's his name from Tennessee? Frist, right? Mm-hmm. Terrible guy, terrible politician. And when it came to talking about medical issues like in Africa or something, actually was a doctor and knew what he was talking about and was like, maybe, you're seeing here somebody who is doing the opposite, where the entire persona is wrapped up in being this rotten doctor.
Mm-hmm. Well, what's really concerning to me is, first off, he's extremely charming, and I've met him in person. He's really,
it's got his eyebrows,
he's really genuinely nice. He has that je ne sais quoi that you look for.
He has star quality. This is what Oprah looks for in people, right? She's
1,000,000%.
Like, you have a star quality. Yeah.
1,000,000%. When I talk to him, he's from Turkey and I'm from Greece, and the area that my dad's from is right near Turkey. You can see Turkey from the coastline from where we are, and he's from that area. So he's like, "Oh, we're like neighbors. I could wave to you." And we had a long conversation about food and I was like, "Oh my God, he got me." I mean, this is a few years ago. I'm like, "He got me. How did he do it? He got
bedside
me."
manner. He's got the bedside manner.
I know what his jam is, and I still got caught. I got caught in his little web of, oh, he's so charming. Anyways, but I think that's important because the audience.
He's doing that in retail politics, in ice cream stores, up and down. I-80 something.
That's
wherever
right.
It is.
That's
81.
Right. And then on top of it, and of course, female voters are very important. They turn out more. On top of it, there's this. It's sort of like the perfect storm of events in that he. We're all saying oh, well, maybe, whoever's going to who the next Trump is going to be DeSantis, or it's going to be Josh Hawley. I could very well in 4 years see Senator Dr. Oz running for president, wooing the entire country. The other aspect is he actually does believe in vaccines. He's been urging people to take vaccines, but simultaneously he is putting he's like a wedge issue for the Fauci people. He's challenging Fauci so he can pull all those folks in.
No, he knows what he's doing. He knows what he's doing. He's right there on.
You heard it here first, guys. You heard it here first.
Should he win this race, he has no limit to his political potential.
Exactly. He's dangerous. All right, Arun, you're the best. Anything else you want to discuss in the last 2 minutes? Got any?
No, man. We went back and forth across the Atlantic a bunch of times. That feels good. Feels like we did a good job today. Yeah.
Relief.
Yeah.
Always a pleasure. Take care.
Ciao.
All right, we're going to do some shout outs. I got some shout outs here. Some people who have been chiming in on the platforms that we have. We've got a lot of platforms. Let's start with the Twitch. Nog Wrangler. What's up, Nog Wrangler? You've been subscribed for a long time. We just want to say hi. Talk I Teacher, excuse me. Also subscribe now for 10 months. Thank you so much. Pagan Communist. Love that. Pagan Communists sound great. Sound like I want to invite you to a dinner. You've been subscribed for 10 months as well. Thank you so much. And a Rogue Jaguar gifted 2 community subscriptions on Twitch. Thank you, a Rogue Jaguar. That is awesome. Matt B, thank you so much. Matt says, Nomi, your next investigative reporting should be on the Hawaii water story. There's also the story about what the Hawaii people are experiencing with the corporate takeover of their culture and lands. Absolutely. It's actually on our list. I think we're going to cover it on Friday. Thank you so much for nudging me. And, we've been watching that story. Thank you so much for that. We will absolutely cover it a little bit more. We've had some folks on talking about the colonization of Hawaii and the effects in the long term. And of course, we talk about that in Puerto Rico all the time, which is always looking at Hawaii saying, see, this is what they're trying to do. All right, continuing on. These are super chats, by the way. Ken M sending £5. £5, thanks, Ken M. Industrial Arts, $5. Thank you. And Tam I Am, $10. Thank you. Ian Kinzel, love you, Ian. So happy to see your show live again. For the next wish, I want centrist Dems to be a partisan against the GOP, even Liz Cheney, as they are against the left. Yeah, that would be great. All I want for Christmas is that. Okay. All right. What else do we have here? We have some super chats here, I think. And we have new patrons. Patron DHLJ and Winchester and Jen and Louis P and John O. Thank you so much for pledging for the year. So grateful. This stuff makes our show work. Sometimes I'm on the road, as you know. We have a lot of great people on our team. And this is how, a show operates. Since we don't lean into picking fights with our allies, we have to really rely on our patrons, because when you pick fights with allies, people click, and then the ads come in and get all the money from Google and all the different spaces on Twitch. We don't do that. So we really do rely on your individual contributions and your support. So thank you so much. That's the Patreon. If you don't know already, you can join us on Patreon. You can get us in audio form. We break it into pieces. You get stuff early. You get extra stuff. Go to patreon.com/The Nomiki Show. We will see you for Femme Friday. Stay in solidarity.
The Nomiki Show. We clash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, fake fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show.